Hi, welcome to this week's episode of Art Like Everything Else, the podcast. So this week we're going to be talking about art and Black existentialism. While existentialism may be a form of philosophy that most people know of, in fact, I did briefly discuss it in a previous episode titled Art and Futility. For those who might like a bit of a refresher on existentialism, so existentialism is a form of philosophy that explores the issue of human existence. Black existentialism, however, is a bit different. So according to the article, Black existentialism, extending the discourse on meaning and existence, which I will have linked below. Black existentialism provides the philosophical grounding to explore the struggle to live within inequity, racialization, and historical oppression as experienced by Black people. And so this is the framework in which I will be exploring the works of art for today's episode. And I do not doubt that there is more art than what I will be covering today that might express the same sentiment. So if you have any you'd like to share, please drop them in the comments below. I'd love to check them out. With that being said, let's get started. The first work of art that will be discussed in this episode will be a poem by Langston Hughes. But first, a little bit of background about Mr. Hughes. So Langston Hughes is a poet, a literary talent, and a marvel known as one of the leaders in the Harlem Renaissance. He lived in the U.S. during a time where racism and oppression were a lot more obvious. I say obvious because I don't want to imply that racism isn't happening today, because originally I wanted to say rampant, but I don't want to imply that racism isn't happening today. Some people just find it harder to see, but I argue that racism has become harder to recognize by many people. Hughes wrote novels and short stories, plays, books for children, and of course, poems. So during Hughes' lifetime, he was an activist for the plight that African Americans were facing during that time. And during that time, some of his feelings showed up in his work, like the poem I found for this first piece of art. So the poem is Remember. It was composed in 1930, and it goes as follows. Remember, by Langston Hughes. Remember the days of bondage and remembering. Do not stand still. Go to the highest hill and look down upon the town where you are yet a slave. Look down upon any town in Carolina, or any town in Maine for that matter, or Africa, your homeland, and you will see what I mean for you to see. The white hand, the thieving hand, the white face, the lying face, the white power, the unscrupulous power that makes of you the hungry, wretched thing you are today. When reading this poem, I felt it did a really good job of capturing the struggle of living within inequity and racialization that can be found in Black existentialism, which is not unlike our next work of art. Our next work of art is an entire album by none other than Kendrick Lamar. I was inspired to actually go and check out the entire album after the latest battle between him and that Canadian, and I can definitely say I was not disappointed. The album we will be talking about is Good Kid, Mad City, a short film by Kendrick Lamar. This is a beautiful album released in 2012, and I highly recommend you listen to it if you haven't already. Even if you have heard it before, I recommend giving it another listen. I do believe it's that good. Also, like with this new information, it might allow you to kind of look at things a bit differently. So this album is a coming-of-age story for a young Kendrick Lamar who grew up in Compton. It follows him and friends of his on an adventure in the underserved community that Kendrick grew up in, with guest appearances from his parents, and this album even has a contribution from Maya Angelou. There are songs like Good Kid, where Kendrick talks about what it's like living in a community with rival gangs, and then he also talks about what it's like to experience a racist police force. There is also Sing About Me, which talks about his peers in that same underserved community, and they detail the inequities that they deal with for the sake of survival in an unjust and racialized society. This album encapsulates the Black existentialism that we discussed earlier, the exploration of the struggles to live within inequity, racialization, and historical oppression as experienced by Black people. Something that I liked, and maybe liked isn't the right word, I found it cathartic when I first experienced both of these works of art. And I say cathartic because that's what it is. Kind of to feel seen in the double consciousness that W.E.B. Du Bois discusses in his book, The Soul of Black Folks. I have a copy right here. And so for those who might not have heard about it, double consciousness refers to Black Americans' ability to see themselves through the eyes of white Americans, or as Du Bois states in his book, this sense of always looking at oneself through the eyes of others, of measuring one's soul by the tape of a world that looks on in amused contempt and pity. One ever feels his two-ness, an American, a Negro, two souls, two thoughts, two unreconciled strivings, two warring ideals in one dark body whose dogged strength I alone keeps it from being torn. Whose dogged strength alone keeps it from being torn asunder. Both of these works of art showcase that, albeit in different ways, they represent this double consciousness that can be exhausting, but often crucial to being able to navigate our lives. In Langston Hughes' poem, Remember, Langston Hughes talks about visibly seeing the ways in which whiteness works and is present, and how the effects of that show up in not just in your surroundings, but also how it shows up in yourself as the hungry, wretched thing you are today. In Kendrick Lamar's song, Good Kid, he is actively aware how he is seen by the police officers who have stopped him saying things like, and you ask, lift up your shirt, because you wonder if a tattoo of affiliation can make it a pleasure to put me through gang files, but that doesn't matter because the matter is racial profile. Showing that he is well aware of what he is seen as because of his Blackness and the community he lives in. He is well aware of how he looks to a white society and what to expect because of that. These works of art are also great examples of Black existentialism because they both explore that struggle to live in the inequities that they are faced with. Langston Hughes discusses the looking down into a town where you are still a slave. He talks about the thieving hand, the lying face, and the unscrupulous power that is behind the inequity and the oppression that you are facing. And Kendrick discusses similar sentiments in his album. If you listen to songs like Money Trees or Mad City or Sing About Me, honestly, throughout this entire album, you experience and witness the inequity and the racialization that Kendrick lived through growing up in Compton. A lot of which comes from a long history of historical oppression forced upon the communities that live there. So these works of art do a really good job of displaying the frustration and the realities faced by Black people, and it's why I thought they did a good job of representing, or at least pulling on, that philosophy. I will be linking a lecture on Black existentialism below for those who might be interested in hearing a bit more about this topic, and there will also be a short video for those who may not want to sit through like a full hour lecture. But yeah, I did think this was a really fun episode, albeit short, but it was a lot of fun, and I want you all to let me know what you think. I'm really intrigued by philosophy, so this is something I'm thinking of leaning into doing a bit more often. So if you have any recommendations for others that I can check out, drop it in the comments as well. And yeah, maybe even Black existentialism can be art like everything else. Last and certainly not least is this week's awe moment. For those new to listening, the awe moment is art that made me think for whatever week it is that I filmed this episode. I have a fairly loose definition of art, so for me it can be quotes, tweets, pictures, videos, etc. Anyways, moving forward, the art that made me think this week were 3 quotes that I found through Twitter. So it's the original tweet with 2 of the quotes, and then a quote tweet with an additional quote. And so the original tweet, let me actually pull it up. The original tweet is by Twitter user Moth into Flames, and it reads, when Dostoevsky wrote, "I exist in thousands of agonies, I exist." And Andrea Gibson, "I suppose I love this life in spite of my clenched fists." And then Twitter user Weeping Caesar quoted that tweet with, adding Mary Shelley's life, "Although it may only be an accumulation of anguish, is dear to me, and I will defend it." I thought that these quotes were not only like powerful and like profound, but I felt like they can be a good example of like what it's like to live with. I felt like they could be a good representation of living within like Black existentialism. It's even present in Kendrick's album, especially when you listen to the last song, Compton. Like, we exist in thousands of agonies. We exist, and we will choose to defend it. We will choose to continue to love this life of anguish, of this life in spite of our clenched fists. And I thought that was beautiful, because it's just the reality for a lot of people, not just those who might be navigating or living with Black existentialism specifically, but like it's a sentiment that I feel is present in among a lot of people. And so if you know of any other quotes similar to that, I would love it if you drop them below. I'd love to hear them. I collect quotes. I have a whole little book of just quotes that I collect when I like them. So yeah, please like, follow, subscribe, and let me know what you think of this episode. But that's all I have for you today. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.